Corey, and I'm joined by Paul.
All right, mate.
And by Neil.
Hello.
First week of the season, a week very much belonging to our very new hero, Duckens Nazon. Would you agree?
No.
No.
Yes. Yes.
It's amazing that in a week where we win 3-0 with a Jody Jones hat-trick, that all of the talk has been about this guy who presumably people are only so enthralled by because of the fact that he's from Haiti and he's called Duckens Nazon.
And you can use the duck emoji.
You can use the duck emoji.
There's novelty of that. It's just fantastic.
It's people have really fallen in love with it, haven't they? And the only loan player that we've got as well. Is that right? Is he the only player that we've got on loan?
At the moment.
At the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, quite.
Let's put that caveat in there now.
Yeah, quite. Well, with that in mind, what about moments of the week for everyone then? So, Paul?
Like Jody Jones, I have 3.
Okay.
On Saturday, I took my daughter who's 5 and my niece who's 7, and I enticed them with the offer of crafts pre-kickoff. And anyone who spends a lot of time with young girls knows that crafts are definitely a lot more enjoyable than watching the football. And I know our club is a basket case. I know there are people involved in our club who would rather not. However, there are lots of people involved with our club who make it a really good club to support. And those are the people who run the children's area and the family zone pre-kickoff. And they just do a really good job. And they made it really fun. There was a couple of different competitions to be won. And just those sort of things just make life a lot easier when you're taking children to the football. So, there are a lot of things wrong, but a lot of things right with it, and that's definitely one of them. Second in the list is Jody Jones' hat-trick, because I'm just so glad that he played as well as he can, and he bagged a hat-trick. And then number 3 was the only reason that I'm not completely annoyed that I went yesterday, is the man Duck, who just for the first 60 minutes was possibly one of the only interesting things about the game, and then for the last 30 minutes even he was sort of ignored. But he is an exciting player. He's just an exciting player, and that's all you want from an attacking player sometimes, is them to be mildly exciting, and him and Jody Jones have provided some excitement this week.
And that's, we only want a bit of excitement from now and again, don't we? It's not too much to ask, is it?
No.
Neil, your moment of the week.
I do have one, but first an apology to Corey Adai, who last week I suggested that he needed to grow a bit, basing that opinion on when I last saw him. When turns out that man has grown to be the tallest man in history. I don't know if you saw the team photo, but he's taller than all our keepers by a good 3 or 4 inches. It is insane.
He's taller than the stand, isn't he? I mean, I think he's not even stood on a bench. He's just on the floor while everyone else is on the bench. Right back.
Yeah, they've all got the yellow pages underneath them except him. It's balmy, because I thought I've got it wrong. I had got it wrong, but fortunately someone like from the club, I think Thomas Leach, kind of validated what I said and kind of agreed with me that he had grown a lot over the summer. Not just the summer, but I guess the last few months. But it's incredible just how tall that man is. So well grown, Corey.
I'm going to give you some credit here, though, Neil, because I'm not totally convinced. Maybe you were talking exclusively about height. When we had that conversation, I thought you were talking about the need to fill out a little bit, because he's still quite slight, isn't he?
I was talking about a lot, really. Yeah. But it felt quite daft looking back. And I was like, let's have a look at this team photo. And Corey Adai, the one person I said needed to grow, is the one person who could probably do with not growing anymore.
Yeah, he is quite something, isn't he, now?
He's done with growing now, I think. That'll do him anymore. It's just going to be difficult. So, yeah. But that wasn't really my moment of the week, getting something wrong. As you know, I don't like that. Moment of the week was just Jody Jones's second goal, I reckon. That was the one that I enjoyed the most. I'm just a huge fan of sort of watching any player sort of trust their ability, and having scored that first and having that buzz of confidence, Jody Jones taking on the player and turning onto his right foot and shooting in that way was just fantastic, because we all saw last season Jody Jones doesn't like using his right foot very much, and certainly wouldn't have trusted himself in that position to try that. He probably would have tried the skill anyway, because he does that a lot, but onto his right foot and having a shot was very good. So I was pleased for him, and that was my moment.
I mean, clearly for me, I would go Jones's hat-trick. I think all of the fun surrounding Duckens Nazon, as we've discussed, I think has been... It's nice at the start of the season when things are interesting and people haven't, it is kind of Alex Nimley region, isn't it? Where you're like, oh, this is interesting, he might be really good, without it then turning out that he's either not or whatever. The hope is sometimes quite nice without the actual sort of... realisation of what's to come. But I'm going to choose the Jody Jones's first goal, and what it signified to me was, if you look back at that goal, part of the reason that he has the time to get the shot off in the way that he does is because we had a bunch of players in their box. And that when you watch the highlights back again, compared to previous regimes and managers, the one thing that was notable is that when we find ourselves near the box, we did seem to have players in there quite a lot of the time, and it really seemed to occupy their defenders. And equally, the other two goals, it's great just to have that bit of pace that you counter really nicely. I forgot that I think Mark Robbins is a man sort of tactically quite after my own heart. I don't think he's got these really high-minded philosophies. I think he's just quite pragmatic and sort of numbersy. I like that. Does that make sense? There was it that he kind of get people in the box, have quick players for counter-attacks kind of things. Very sort of smart, just basic stuff like that.
Yeah, it's not complicated, is it, really? It's kind of using physical attributes in the right places on the pitch. So having, quick strikers, quick wingers, but then in the middle, when you need bastards, you have them. You have hard people, and it's fairly straightforward, but it worked on Saturday.
Yeah, talk to us about the midfield bastards, as perhaps they shall henceforth be known.
I think they should be, because there's two of them. Usually we're crying out for just one, and when we get them, they're fairly soft. But the return of Doyle and the introduction of Kelly on Saturday was very new. I mean, the whole team was pretty unfamiliar. First game of the season is always quite difficult because there are new faces and you're just trying to get a feel for things. But there was so much on that pitch which for me was, because I hadn't seen anything from pre-season, was particularly unfamiliar. And I spent a lot of that match just kind of trying to watch individuals and gauge what they're all about. But the midfield is one where they kind of settled down straight away. And Doyle coming back. When we had Doyle in the first place in the Championship, I could kind of take him or leave him, really. And I think much of that was down to the quality. I kind of thought that he lacked kind of the quality at that level, but he was still a good captain and he seemed to care. Whereas coming down to this level, it doesn't seem to matter quite as much that you are a fantastic footballer, but he's got those attributes which are going to make a big sort of impact in the middle of the pitch. And he had a great game. He was just he was pure captain worthy. I would never give someone man of the match when there's a person on the pitch who's got a hat-trick. That was daft. I don't know what either of you thought. I know it's only kind of trivial, really, and he did have a good game, but Jody Jones was man of the match all day, surely.
I mean, Paul, you would think anyone that got a hat-trick in a game, it really has to go to them. Would you have gone for Doyle as man of the match?
No, I mean, it had to go to Jody Jones because Jody Jones was the only player on either team who really stood out as having a bit of something about them, a bit of that X factor. I mean, I know the thing is, we all loved Doyle. My group, we all loved Doyle the first time he was here. And you watch Doyle come back, and everyone's raving about it. It's like he's basically doing what he did 10 years ago. And he still does the things that Doyle's always done, which he kicks people, he wins his tackles. He also, at least once a match, will try and pass the ball through a physical object, which we all know can't happen.
Yeah.
And you watch that and you're like, Doyle's back. Like in the second half, you pass the ball aimlessly out of play. And you couldn't be angry at him because it's like, that's what Doyle does. And he broke up a lot of play and he won a lot of ball, and you were like... But I think a lot of the sort of stuff that's been heaped on him is mainly because in the last 10 years, apart from that Spalland Roman Vince lot, we haven't had a Doyle replacement. In fact, it's really bizarre that the Doyle replacement is Mickey Doyle. So, you know,
like Newcastle replacing Kevin Keegan with Kevin Keegan, or the sort of rumoured to be.
Yeah, basically. And, you know, the second half, I thought the midfield faded quite badly, including Doyle. And we're sort of lucky at that point that Notts County just didn't have anything about them. But from a first game back, yeah, he had a really good game, you know. But that's what he did last season for Portsmouth, isn't it? I mean, nothing's changed for Doyle, really. Can
I just jump in at this point with Doyle? Did anyone see, we had Dan Mallier on Twitter send us that picture of Liam Walker, who was playing for Notts County. Have you seen it?
Yeah, I noticed that one. It's a bit of a mark.
Paul, have you seen it?
Yeah, you've seen the gif of the tackle as well.
No, is it evil?
Basically, he wins the ball's in between them. He sort of wins the ball on the floor, but his foot then comes up and basically stamps on him in the stomach.
It's a bit studdy, isn't it?
Neil, I mean, the whole first half was really, really niggly. Both sides were quite, I don't know, dirty is probably not the right word, but they were definitely pushing the boundaries. Both sides were. And it was definitely a sort of game where, I mean, the referee didn't help because he gave free kicks for a lot of things which weren't, in my opinion, free kicks. But, you know, it was a niggly game of football.
For anyone scratching their heads out there, Neil, can you shed a bit of light on what the picture shows?
It shows some very clear markings on his midriff and also a chunk taken out of a birthmark on his abdomen. It's on my blog, actually, if you want to go and have a look at the picture, but it's a bit of a nasty one.
Yeah, it's quite something, and it comes with #football, #disgusting tackle, #Doyle.
#follow me, #follow for follow.
I just thought, if I hadn't seen any of that game and had have just seen that social media post with #disgusting tackle, #Doyle, I'd have been like, oh, I'm glad he's back.
Yeah, he was just whinging as well. That was the other good thing about it. Just someone caring enough to kind of moan at the ref constantly. Half of it's kind of put on, I'm sure, but we have missed it. We really have missed that sort of midfield whinger. It's great.
I mean, I hate it, but there's massive value to it, isn't there?
Well, that's it. I mean, I hate it when it's against us. I can't stand players whinging, but just one of those where when you're so desperate to get out of the league and start some bloody matches, maybe you just have to grit your teeth and say, okay, yeah, we need one as well, please. Let's not be a purist, and let's just hope that him and Kelly and some of the other moaners, like O'Brien, our goalkeeper, who may well be the biggest moan of the lot. The only difference being nobody is ever around him when he's doing it. He has to find someone to shout at. It's incredible. It's kind of like Joe Murphy in stereo. It's just incredible, that amount of shouting from that one man, which is useful, I guess. I think sometimes it's a little bit more of a hindrance when you've got a goalie just shouting every single time, because eventually you just sort of negate it. You just sort of think, oh, he's shouting again, isn't he? And you kind of probably just dismiss it. But he's obviously a bit of a leader in that back line, in place of Burge, who wasn't around. But that whole back line was was very new, actually. So you had Grimmer, Hyam, McDonald and Stokes, obviously the only one we know. And I thought it was reasonably sturdy, let's call it that. There were some moments when they kind of struggled with position, but I thought Grimmer, he kind of had nerves in the opening 10 minutes, but I think he looked quite good and he showed sort of glimpses of being a very, very good fullback. McDonald, I was very pleased with him, actually. I thought he's big, strong, he has a bit of pace about him, and he did this incredible bit of skill, or not incredible, he's a centre-back, so it seems incredible, on the left wing where he took on a player, inexplicably, and it was pretty good to watch. Hyam, he's really unnoticeable. So in the two games I watched him so far, he's been there, he's kind of won some tackles, won some headers. The only thing I have noticed about him is he's pretty slow. So I think Willis will be jumping in place of him when sort of he's back and fit. And Stokes kind of back it up and running now, I guess, after struggling to come back from injury last year. So, I mean, as a defensive unit, it kind of stood its ground, won some decent headers, won some decent tackles, and it was a real sort of horrible sort of match for him, really, because you just had Amiobi instead just getting in the way. So they were all right up front, but there weren't much quality there. But it was just the same old thing, challenge after challenge, so aerial tackle, and it was just hard work from all game. But they kind of just dealt with it as best they could, really. And then I guess the other thing really was it was the Jody Jones show. So he was the only guy, like Paul said, who took that sort of level of quality beyond sort of your day-to-day stuff, and he actually showed that he can be a real threat in this league. So he's got that outstanding pace, which will make a difference. And what he showed as well was kind of the ability to finish, which we've not seen up to sort of this point. He's clearly a very talented player, and like I've said a million times before, unless he believes he's as talented and kind of on the pitch commits to that talent, he's kind of never going to go anywhere. But we've kind of seen that in 2 games already, that he's ready to do that now. And there were just 3 really well taken goals, linked up well with his teammates. Who was it? It was Vincenzi set up the first one. I mean, it was nothing special, but obviously it's nice for him to get an assist on his debut. And I guess the other 2 assists were from debutants as well. So Biamu, who the only thing he did was set up that goal, I have to admit. And then Nazon, who came on with a ridiculous run, and no one would have blamed if he'd had a shot at that point, but he had good awareness to set up Jones and rounded off a very, very nice day.
I wanted to ask you about Biamu, because it's the endlessly fascinating nature of football fandom that it seems that Biamu has already been sort of decided as being unfit, sort of not, fitness-wise, but inadequate. And that Nazon is being championed by some as an absolute godsend. But it's far too early to make a decision on either of them, isn't it?
Well, it's the nature of sort of different footballing styles, isn't it? I mean, if you come on as a footballer, you may be rubbish, but if you come on and run around like a maniac, people will give you a little bit more sort of time of day. So, an example, Jordan Ponticelli came on yesterday. I know he's a young kid, and this is not me criticising, but he came on and pretty much what he did was run around a lot, which is great, because what that does is people get behind you. They see that you're giving it some effort. Certain players just, it's not in their nature to do that, and I know that's most of us will look at that and think that's wrong. You should always be given that sort of level of effort, but certain players play slightly differently, and when you're playing well as a team and when you're controlling the match and you're kind of controlling the ball, it's not as noticeable because the ball is kind of going to find its way to you and you can play your normal game and you don't really have to put in as much effort. When you're not really controlling the game or the possession of the ball quite as much, and then you've got a player up front who's not kind of running or making that sort of assertive effort to get the ball, it's very noticeable. And I think that's kind of where he's struggling at the moment. It's kind of that sort of, I'm trying to think of a comparison of another, well, there's plenty of players who haven't worked hard, but kind of like Leon Best, where there was this player who, when he got the ball, there was some quality there was some talent there, but getting the ball to him was kind of the main target because he was never going to win it. So it's so early to say, but I can see why people will become frustrated with a player like that, because it's kind of, that style is always going to attract criticism.
The other thing I wanted to ask you specifically about was there seemed to be a bit of a tepid reaction from some quarters about Vincenti's performance, but then a lot of other people saying it was fine. Did you have a particular view on it?
I heard more towards fine, really. I think first half he made one sort of high-profile error, where he'd done something well and then he just gave it away in quite a dangerous area, and it didn't look great, and obviously things like that stick in people's minds. And then after that, he showed some nice touches. He was a great threat aerially, which you don't really ask for from your winger, but it's part of his makeup to be able to win the ball in the air. So that worked out for him. And then in the second half, he was just really quite quiet. So when you kind of add up all these things, you end up with a mixed bag first half and then a quiet second half. So it's one game. I can't judge him fully on it, but there was nothing there which concerned me from a quality perspective. I think there's certainly something there, but I struggled to judge him particularly harshly on that match because I didn't think there were too many moments of poor quality. It was more sort of a few errors in the first half, and then compounded with quite a quiet second half, which doesn't always mean they're a bad player. It just means they're not able to get into the game, maybe because of the way the team's playing.
Paul, your view on Vincenti? I think you were on the more vocal camp of not being particularly impressed.
Well, it's really hard because I didn't think he had a good game. I mean, I just thought he gave the ball away quite a lot, and his distribution was poor. And even though he won a lot of headers, even some of those weren't particularly well placed and well aimed. But it's like you make these comments. It's like he didn't. In my opinion, he was possibly our worst player on the day, and it sort of stood out. And everyone's going, but you've got to go. I'm not writing him off, but on that day, I thought he stood out as being below par, and I was surprised he lasted the 90 minutes. What then surprised me was he didn't start last night, because having spoken to people around the group, it would appear that he's like that in training, where he's not quite up to speed yet. And it wasn't helped by the fact he had Stokes behind him, who another player who wasn't 100% fit, and you could tell that Stokes wasn't quite right. And we know Stokes. We've watched Stokes for the last 18 months, 2 years. We know what a fully fit Stokes is like, and what we saw on Saturday was one who was not 100%. And he didn't have a good game, but you give him the leeway. I didn't think Vincenzi had a good game. He looks like a guy who needs games. No one's writing him off. It's just he didn't particularly play well, and that's about it. I mean, I sort of understand where Neil's coming a bit on Bimawi, however you say his name, Maxi.
Not that, I guess.
Not that way. But for me, yesterday, it wasn't the fact he wasn't running around like a headless chicken trying to win the ball back. It was his movement when we had the ball was quite poor. His touch was quite poor. I mean, if you see the highlights of the first goal, he loses a 50-50 challenge and he just lies on the floor pretending to be injured. And you're like, I need a bit more. You've come from non-league. What I expect is a bit more, like, not effort, but just a bit more will to impress. And what I saw was a guy who was sort of just wandering around a bit, not really paying much attention, but not even when we had the ball, it was like the duck was running down the wing and you were like, oh, okay, he's going to break into the box now, because that's, if he's not into link-up play, not all strikers are, he's going to be in the box and demanding, and he was sort of ambling around, and you're like, you're not showing enough here for a player who you've got a chance in the team. Like, for me, the duck starts on Saturday, from what I saw of the four strikers we've seen, because given the ball, he looks like he's going to make things happen. He's an interesting player to watch, and he must be quite difficult to play against, because he's quite quick, he's mobile, he looks quite strong, and he's quite direct. And you put him, out of the four strikers we've seen this season, he's the only one who's impressed me at all. And you're like, well, he's taken his opportunity. And you look at the other guy and you're like, you're not taking this in the same way that he is. You're not trying to impress in the same way that your teammate is. And maybe it didn't help the fact he was alongside the Duck, who started so well yesterday. But it was just a case of, like, I expect a better just attitude of the whole game, not just when they've got the ball, but when we've got the ball as well. I expect to see certain things, and I didn't see it from him so far.
Interesting stuff. Do we want to talk about Mark McNulty for the sake of completeness? It feels like we talked about everyone else. Neil, did you have a view on his performance? I gather he missed a couple of sort of possible chances.
I thought he was fairly quiet, actually. Of all the players on the pitch, he's the one that I don't have much of an opinion on in any form. Just you kind of got a hint of what he's about. I think he's somewhat technical. I think there's an element of class there, but you kind of need to get the ball, really, to show that. And whether that's just a kind of unfitness or just not quite ready, or just an unfortunate game where he didn't get the ball enough, I'm not sure, but I'll definitely need more time on him. I don't really know what he's about at the moment.
And am I right in thinking that he played in behind Bevan as opposed to in front, or is that just...
It switched around, really. I mean, by the second half, he was pretty much sort of the lone striker in the sense where he was on the shoulder. And that's one thing I did get from him, was that he had quite nice positional play. He was in the he kind of set himself in nice places where someone with pace would have got him behind. Unfortunately, from what I could tell, his pace doesn't quite match his sort of awareness. So unfortunately, someone like Adam Armstrong's going to get onto the end of some of the balls that were ended sort of we put through to him. But yeah, he did mix it up a little bit. So first half he was back and forth, playing on the edge of the sort of the final defender. Then he dropped deep. But by the second half, I kind of felt he was sort of the main man up front, whereas Bevan was kind of just doing his usual Bevan thing and working his way along the line, just making everybody think.
Okay, any final thoughts on the Notts County game before we move on to Blackburn?
Yeah, I'd just like to throw my sixpence in on. I didn't really like that strike partnership at all. I mean, my issue in the first half is I was getting sick to death of both of them just falling over all the time, and at times it appeared that they were waiting for things to fall over for, and it was just getting a bit frustrating. And when you take it forward to last night, when you see Dominic Samuels taking 3 players on and could go down, but have the awareness and the knowledge that if there's 3 people trying to kick him, then one of his teammates or 2 of his teammates are completely unmarked. And just seeing, McNulty and Bevan just didn't strike me as a partnership. It just, in the second half when Notts County, when the game was probably more 50-50 and we had to hit it long, neither of them got really involved in the game at all. And it sort of took the substitutions just to bring on a different type of striker, because they just weren't getting us into, they weren't getting hold of the ball. Neither of them were showing enough. And as I said, it's sort of, as a strike partnership, I didn't see them sort of link at all. And in the first half, where we were the better side, Notts County pretty shit in that first half. Again, there didn't seem to be much, and it was a worry of how little spark there appeared to be in and around the box from those two. And it's when I say that Jones was the only real goal threat, it did seem like unless Jones did something, and he didn't do, the first goal, he didn't skin anyone, but he found the time and the space and had the confidence to pick his spot. And it was just, when Jody Jones is so stand out above the rest of your players, it does make you sort of take a step back and think about things.
Okay, anything else we want to add, or is it time to move on to the Blackburn game?
Yeah, we can move on.
I think it's time. Let me start off. Dominic Samuel, a name familiar to most of us here, mainly because it's what I call Dominic, and who does Side Sammy's previews things. But how did he play? Because I'd be interested to see how much he's come on since he played for us.
It's hard to tell, because if going back to the Notts County game just very briefly, if Notts County had had a striker of any ilk, they might have had some really good opportunities in the second half. There were 3 times where they tried to play the ball through to John Stead, who is 34 and John Stead, and it didn't quite work. And if they'd have had a pacier striker, we'd have been in deep trouble. And when you see Dominic Samuel, who's a pacey, direct striker, he taught, I think, them on target, and quite a lot of them were from him, basically just taking out. I mean, he was a class above our defenders yesterday. I mean, the only person, one of the players, the player who should have got man of the match yesterday by far was the keeper, who just came out of it looking really good, because you watch the highlights. He stopped the ball with everything. Every part of his body he made a save with, because the amount of times he was exposed. And he had a good game on Saturday and a really good game last night. And he's definitely one of the players who I think started the season well. But Dominic Samuel just stood out.
O'Brien was one of the players who kept his place from Saturday to Tuesday. It was quite a changed team, wasn't it? And you finished talking about the Notts County game in terms of Bevan and McNulty. We found Biamu and Nazon up front together. Is that how it was set up, or one off the other?
Yeah, it was still 4-4-2. I mean, Nazon's... Yeah, I mean, I think they basically take it in turns to go nominally more forward. But Nazon was the guy who was... It's difficult to say. I mean, he was the one who was just more interested to watch. So he appeared on the right, he appeared on the left. You know, there was no set position for either of them. He was the fulcrum of our attack. And then Maxime sort of just floated around behind him, not really sort of getting into any positions of note. So Nazon is just one of those players. It's like when the ball goes to him, you're just interested. He's got quite good touch, not immaculate touch, but good enough, and that stood out a bit. And he's just an interesting player. So yeah, they still went with 4-4-2, but he really took his opportunity.
Who else took their opportunity? We had Devon Kelly-Evans, Chris Camwell at left back.
The defence was... It's difficult. Blackburn played really well, and if you can't look at our defence without taking into context the midfield, and this is I have an issue with the team he picked yesterday, but I have the biggest issue with the fact I felt really sorry for Ben Stevenson, who clearly hasn't played a lot recently, and Jordan Shipley alongside him, who both of them were just dropped in at the deep end in a completely unfair way. So Blackburn, basically playing, the Mobley formation in 4-2-3-1, completely dominated midfield. They just had the midfield, and they had it all game. So it's difficult for the defence, because the defence were basically trying to stop this onslaught that was overrunning the midfield. And if you go across the back line, I didn't think... Grimmer didn't have a particularly great game on Saturday. He's interesting getting forward, but his crossing wasn't that great. Defensively, Notts County seemed to get a lot of crosses in from his side, so he didn't defensively play that well on Saturday. Again, yesterday, he did one decent thing in the box, but he had a lot of opportunity which he wasted. Defensively, he was, again, not great. I mean, what he did for their second goal, I mean, I don't care how many games of football you played. If you're still using your weakest foot and kicking the ball back into the centre of play, someone's got to be having words, because no one would have complained if he'd have whacked that with his right foot over the halfway line into the crowd. But why is he playing it? So defensive things like that, which if we understand Grimmer isn't particularly good at, it's frustrating that he made that error that early on in his career, because you're sort of going, well, we've been warned that you're not the best defensively, and you're sort of showing that, and it's a bit... That's not helpful. The other centre-backs, like McDonald, looks all right. He looked quite good against John Stead. He looked slightly worse. I know he got man of the match yesterday, but he looked slightly worse against Dominic Samuel. But I don't think we're going to come across any more Dominic Samuels this season. So he's looking all right. I have no real issue with him. He's just... He's not meant to be there, is he? Sorry, go on.
He's not meant to be there, is he? He's filling in for the fact that presumably James Pearson isn't fully fit and Jordan Willis is injured, isn't he? He's probably the fourth choice centre-back in a situation where they're probably looking to bring in another centre-back to push him further down that. He's one for the future, isn't he?
Oh, then why bother signing him? It's like we're not in the position to be signing players to be sat in our reserves. If you're going to go out and get someone, they've got to be ready to play, especially, all this, we play so many games yet. He is, at the moment, first choice centre-half because Jordan Willis is injured. And he looked all right-ish. But at the end of the day, one of the things I said last week, and I stand by, I'm surprised we didn't go out and get an absolute bastard at centre-half. Because for periods, John Stead and Show were sort of dominating, but were luckily too shit to capitalise. And I don't see Jordan Willis coming back in, making us more physically dominant. So, that's where we are. But again, it's difficult because sort of Notts County was shit, and Dominic Samuel plays for Blackburn in League One. So we're only making sort of very early judgments, but the defence doesn't look that secure, even though they kept a clean sheet. They don't look overly secure, so you can just see how that developed. But as I said last night, they weren't helped by the fact that Doyle and Kelly were given the day off, so the midfield was just completely overrun.
Neil, what did you think of the decision to rest so many players?
I made my peace with it quite quickly, really. Obviously you want to win every match, and you kind of, especially having won that first game, there's a part of you that thinks, let's get another win under our belt and like put our best team and see what we can do. I think there was a couple of players too far. I've got no issues trying people out, and I think he did the right thing in giving certain players a game. It was just there's just kind of too many young players all at one point, which makes it cumulatively a very difficult thing for the team to kind of cope with, because individually I look at each of these players and I can see there's the capability to, if we need them, they can come in and they can do a job for us. But it like Paul says, it's when you put someone like Ben Stevenson, who technically is a fantastic player, but he's still not at the age where he's the one who's supposed to be in charge. He's not an in-charge player. He plays alongside someone. So when he's playing alongside someone who's getting their first start for the team, I think, and still trying to find his way, it's just very tricky for them. But I'm kind of past any sort of anger towards doing that, and I can just kind of trying to pick out the positives about what they were doing in the team and what they can learn from that. And there was plenty for them to learn. It was bloody hard work. Blackburn played particularly well, and especially someone like Shipley, who seemed to be drawn to the ball more and more and ended up looking absolutely knackered. But he didn't hide, which I was really pleased with, because at that age, there's sometimes going to be a sort of a temptation to hide, but he didn't. And ultimately, it was just one of those games where we weren't going to win it. Come to a point, because there was only so much we could offer, and it was very much a Moby team. They kept the ball relentlessly. I mean, there were sort of 40 pass moves at point, and it wasn't like really incisive a lot of the time, but it was still keeping the ball and making young players work and making them doubt themselves because they're not winning the ball back, and all this sort of stuff adds together to a difficult match. But they've got it under their belt now, and it's a shame that we lost. But I like I say, I'm happy to concede it. It's happened. Wish we'd won, but we didn't win. We got some experience under our belt. The duck looks good. Let's move on.
But I understand where you're coming from. If he'd have put the team up, if he'd have just come out and said, look, we're going to lose, I'm putting my reserve team out at lunchtime, I wouldn't have bothered going down. And that's what, it frustrates me, the fact that, and I know it's personal, it's completely a personal thing,
well,
it's a very selfish thing. I just felt that it was a complete waste of my fucking time.
But you knew you knew we were
no, I didn't know he was going to. I didn't know he was going to completely decimate the team. I didn't.
How many rests would would have been acceptable?
I wouldn't have changed. I wouldn't have changed the central midfield partnership. And I just think, and I understand where you're coming from on the Shipley, but I think it's just completely unfair. The kid was completely outclassed, and now I'm seeing on Twitter, so we're going, well, he's clearly not ready, and it's like, well, that's.
I think that's a bit much anyway. I don't think it's completely
up. No. It's not. It wasn't. And the longer the game went on, and the fact he was still there, just sort of being tore apart. And the game, as the game went on,
he weren't torn apart.
He was.
Had a tricky game.
He was. The longer it went on, the more he was just chasing shadows, and he was just getting nowhere near it. And when he got on the ball, he was so tired. He was just giving it away. And you were like, I don't see what I'm learning from this, other than he's not ready to play at that level. But I knew that before kickoff. And then you just look at, it's just felt like, if you're going to sacrifice it, come out and just say, look, I'm sacrificing this. I don't care about the League Cup. And that'd be fine. I couldn't care less. But just felt there was the opportunity after Saturday to sort of build on something. And it's the only time this season we're one game away from playing a Premier League club, which would have given everyone a bit of a boost. And you just like, and then with half an hour to go, he moved the only player who made my life any sort of interesting yesterday to the right wing. And it was like, oh, so the player I'm actually excited about watching is barely involved for half an hour.
And yet they beat us by 2 deflected goals.
Yeah, they did, because our goalkeeper made about 4 blinding saves. He made some great saves, and I'm really proud of him. I'm really happy that he played really well. But I didn't need to waste 8 hours of my life to find out our goalkeeper's not that bad. And I said, if he had just come out and just said, look, I'm making all these changes, and I'm giving them all these kids experience, it'd be like, okay, then it's a glorified friendly, and I don't have to fucking travel. That's fine. You know, people who live in Cov, they can go. People, you know, we got free tickets is the other reason I went. That's fine. I just felt, for me, and I can only ever go on my own personal experience, I felt it was a waste of my time. And it slightly annoys me because I don't need that. I just, like, the next time it comes to a cup game, I'm not going to bother because why should I? And it just felt like it was just, you know, it doesn't matter. It's a game that doesn't matter. And it's like, that's fine. Then come out and say, look, I'm going to drop my midfield. Because I'm going to play a bunch of kids and they're going to be outclassed, but it doesn't matter. That would have been fine. I could have dealt with that. But I could have just seen the score on Twitter and just got on with my life. And as I said, I know people completely disagree with me, and I know, Neil, you've obviously completely disagree with me, but it's just so disheartening when you're sat on the M6 going home and it's pissing it down, you're in a traffic jam, and you think, I could have done anything else in my life tonight, and I've gone and watched a bunch of kids get completely destroyed by Blackburn. Great.
People say to us that this is a depressing show. I don't know what to say to them. Paul, come on, second game.
Yeah, but as I said, it's like 8 hours of my life I didn't need to do to watch a bunch of kids.
What,
if Philip said
do
it was
we set up I don't know. What's he supposed to do? I mean, you can't set up a personal back phone and let you know every time he's going to tweak the team not to your liking.
No. There's difference between picking. He obviously sacrificed that game. He sort of admitted in the post-match interview he sacrificed that game. That's fine. I have no issue with that. But then say that's what you're going to do. Just say, look, I'm going to play. We've got a small squad, and I'm going to sacrifice the League Cup. Fair enough. Great. Don't care. It's like the League Cup. It's nice because, I say, you win one game, you could potentially play a Premier League club. We're clearly not going to win it. It clearly doesn't matter. Just come out and say that then. Just say, you know, I've got other priorities than the League Cup.
Let's draw this back to something a tad more positive. We haven't touched on a couple of people. Chris Camwell, Dion Kelly-Evans, who started, and then Kyle Finn came on, and Jordan Ponticelli, who I think we've mentioned briefly. Any words of encouragement for their young careers?
Well, from my perspective, treating them in isolation, I'm happy to see each of them come on at different points in the season to get more minutes, because I think each of them within the team can potentially offer something. I mean, Kyle Finn is a different one because I've just simply not seen enough of him. But as I understand it, he's a young, exciting player who could, if we need something slightly different in a game, let's bring on a left winger and see what he can do. It's more around the point of obviously throwing them all in at the same time makes it harder for the sort of the sum of the whole parts, really. So, but individually, even Devon Kelly-Evans, I mean, he pretty much plays the same as his brother, just on the left wing, and I thought he looked pretty confident and competent on the ball. I think positionally, it's always hard for small players, I find, in teams. It seems to be harder for them to sort of make the mark in their position. So I think he struggled somewhat, especially when he was playing alongside Camwell. But I just think he'll find that useful. I mean, 60 minutes in the first team, he'll feel at least a little bit more familiar with the whole surroundings. And I thought Camwell started pretty well as well. He started well, got caught a few times just because he was left sort of isolated. But he's another one who, if we need a left back, if we're struggling for someone in the position, I've got no qualms with him coming in, because I think he's certainly able to kind of supplement the rest of the players around him.
I think, as usual, it's just a massive credit to the academy, isn't it, to be able to produce so many players that we can throw in. And that whilst it sounds like Blackburn were very much the better team yesterday, don't disgrace themselves, even at a very young age, under very difficult circumstances, as you say, when there's a lot of them thrown in together, and it's a difficult night against a team in a higher league. I think it's hopefully a good indication that the future is bright and that we've got some good kids coming through.
And it's kind of pertinent as well, especially kind of the way things are going as with George Thomas, Maddison, Harries, these players making the moves at the leagues, being picked up. So it's not us just looking at these players through sky blue glasses a lot of the time. It seems that we are producing genuine quality and it's being noted from leagues above. Now, frustrating as it is that we're having to lose these players and we don't get to kind of get the benefit from it, at least we are producing quality. So we've got kind of a pool of players we can actually pick from.
Absolutely. Let's move on and talk about the Grimsby game. So I dialed up, every single time I go to call him Sammy. I called up Dominic earlier to ask him how he thinks things will go down on Saturday, assuming that the game goes ahead, bearing in mind their game was called off on Tuesday for a waterlogged pitch, which is just crazy, isn't it? And this is what he got to say. Hello, Dominic. Thanks for joining us again.
No, it's all right. It's good to be on.
We've got some questions about Grimsby. Let's kick straight off. So, first question, were you surprised that Grimsby's game was called off on Tuesday for a waterlogged pitch, given that, one, it's August, and two, Russell Slade is in charge and the ball was never likely to touch the grass anyway?
I think that's a rhetorical question.
Possibly. Let's start with a proper question then. How did Grimsby do in their first game?
In terms of the scoreline, surprisingly well. They took on Chesterfield, who, I mean, I would say they're sort of one of the sort of playoff sort of promotion favourites, and they beat them 3-1 at Chesterfield's home ground. Looking more closely at the game itself, it was sort of a classic Russell Slade win where they sort of sat back quite a bit, nicked a goal from a set piece, and then sort of just spent the rest of the game soaking up even more pressure and trying to hit them on the counter-attack, and this time it worked.
How do you think they'll get on this season in general?
Grimsby, I'm sort of bemused by, because sort of back in April, when they appointed Russell Slade, they sort of went out their way to bring him back in. They sacked their manager at the time. He'd only been in since, I think, about October or November, and it seemed like the ambition was to put together sort of a top 7 side. However, over the summer, they've only really signed sort of really like quite old veterans like Nathan Clark and Carly Osborne on sort of free transfers, and brought in a couple of sort of untested youngsters on trial too. So I'm not sure really what they're trying to do. The squad itself, I mean, it looks kind of uninspiring even by sort of League Two standards. Got quite a lot of old defenders. Nathan Clark and Danny Collins, I think, are going to be the starting centre-back partnership. And I think off the top of my head, that's a combined age of about 70.
Wow, okay.
Clark's 33, Collins is 37. Got Ben Davis at right back, who's 36. Got a 30-year-old left back, so very old and slow at the back, and haven't really got a goal scorer, sort of a identifiable goal scorer. So it's sort of a bit of a underwhelming squad, really.
If you had to make a pick of one or two of the players in that underwhelming squad who might be worth keeping an eye out for, who would you go for?
I think the one it could be really exciting is a player called Sariki Dembele, whose younger brother is at Celtic. He's called Karamoko Dembele. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's sort of in the headlines last year because I think he was on the Celtic bench at the age of 14, 15 years old, and he's supposed to be an absolute wonder-kid. Well, Sariki Dembele, who's at Grimsby, they brought in from the Nike Academy, where we got Bilal Saeed from, which I think is sort of a place where sort of younger players go to if they can't get a professional club, and sort of they have like a year there to sort of pick up some experience playing against some academies. And he really shone against Chesterfield. It's well worth digging up his assist for Grimsby's second goal, where he starts to run from inside his own half, sort of tears down the middle of the pitch and plays a really wonderful through ball. So he looks possibly like a player who could make a real difference and be set for a big season, even though last season he wasn't playing professional football. The other one to look out for is Sam Jones, who was signed from Gateshead last January and scored 7 goals in 18 appearances from midfield. Slade is using him as more of a striker, but he sort of does work out because he's quite a powerfully built player and quite a good finisher. And another player I'd identify is JJ Hooper, who they've just signed this week. He had a bit of an inconsistent time at Port Vale, but he's strong and he's quick, and whenever I've seen him, he's looked a bit of a handful. So maybe could be someone who could give us a few problems too.
I had a look through the squad earlier, and some familiar names were at a premium. One of the few that I recognised was Scott Vernon, and I was led to look where I'd recognised him from, and came across what I can only describe as one of the most underwhelming goal-scoring records across a career that's ever happened. Do you know anything about him? Is he... Presumably, I must have seen him a bunch of times, but I'm guessing I've never seen him score with a record like this.
I think he's sort of just a big sort of target man striker, which is why he hasn't really been in the goals. Yeah, a good few years at Shrewsbury. I think he was at Aberdeen for a while and was sort of backup player there. He sort of came out to England, ended up in League Two.
Yeah, you can see why Slade would want him then. Speaking of Slade, where did you find yourself with Slade upon his dismissal last season? I am filled with vitriol still against the man, but if you had a chance to say something to him on Saturday, what would your words be?
I think the annoying thing with Russell Slade is, no matter how angry you got at him, I kind of feel like he'd still be sort of a nice guy about it. I remember the Checkatrade Trophy game we played Brighton under 23s, and we won that game quite comfortably. And because all the fans were sat in the stand right behind the dugout, and everyone was sort of chanting, "He's got no hair and we don't care," and he was just giving all the banter back. He was sort of interacting with the fans. He took his cap off when they sang that song. He was having an absolute lovely time, and I couldn't help but think that he's someone where if it had gone well, everyone would have just loved him, but he had an absolute terrible time. It didn't really matter how nice he was.
Massively didn't go well, unfortunately. Okay, good. Round it off with a prediction for the game.
It's going to be an interesting one, sort of another physical test, because it's League Two and it's a team managed by Russell Slade, so you can imagine they're going to be very direct, sort of similar to Notts County. I am kind of worried about the ability of our defence to stand up to that physical test. I know they came through it against Notts County, but I'm not sure whether they were sort of a bit fortunate to come through that. But hopefully, sort of having Doyle, Kelly, and Vincenti back should help matters. But I'm not massively confident about this game for some reason, so I'm going to put it down as a 1-1 draw.
Okay, I mean, when you said not massively confident, I was expecting a prediction for a defeat, so I'll take that. Again, thanks for coming on. Let's just, before you go, remind everyone where they can find your blog and give us a quick rundown of what they can find on the blog at the minute.
You can find my blog at sidewayssammy.wordpress.com, and I think the main thing you're going to get from it at the moment is sort of just previews for each game.
Brilliant. Cheers, mate.
Okay, it's all right.
Okay, thanks again, Dominic. Right, so let's move on to listener questions, shall we? First question, if I can find it. From Tom Leach, I'm going to put this to Neil because I know how dismissive Paul will be of it. Would you rather fight a Duckens-sized duck or 100 duck-sized Duckens?
Oh, 100 of them, because then that means there actually are Duckens. I'm not interested in a duck. I want actual Duckens running around. So yeah, 100 of them, please. Okay,
that sounds good. Question from Carl Bull. Paul, are you in favour of sticking with the team that started last Saturday? Or is there anyone that came into contention on Tuesday that you would start with instead?
I'd start with the duck.
Yeah.
He has to start.
Ahead of?
Either of the two strikers, couldn't care less. Neither of them really, never really. Bevan sort of has fits and starts from impressed with him, but neither of the two strikers. I'd like to see him up front with Kwame, to be honest. Out the
where is Kwame?
I think he's still injured. But yeah, I mean, he has to start because if he doesn't start, then we just rely because the only other player with any spark about them is Jody Jones, and I don't think we can rely on a Jody Jones hat-trick every week.
And final question this week from Andrew Duboc. I'm going to put this to Neil. Will Lee Burge get his place back in goal when fit?
I wouldn't have thought so. No, it's one of those. He may have started sort of the season as first choice in Robinson's mind, but goalies are one of those positions where you can kind of get away with changing it and then giving someone a chance, and if they're good enough, sticking with them. And that's what this O'Brien guy's done. He's come in, he's taken his chance, played well in 2 games, mentally vocal, really in charge of that penalty area, which is good to see in many respects. So yeah, it's O'Brien at the moment. O'Brien. I don't know how long Burge is out for. I don't know if it's if we're talking days, weeks, or whatever. But for now, it's O'Brien, and no qualms with that.
Paul, I mean, I guess you would agree, given your praise of him earlier in the pod.
Yeah, I mean, he made some great saves yesterday. He kept it down, and it's just he's one of those keepers who doesn't seem to mind taking it anywhere on the body, which is just quite nice to see. I mean, the vocal thing sometimes looks a bit like a pantomime as he's running off shouting definitely at someone, and you're shouting at someone who's got nothing to do with fuck all, but at least it's making you feel a bit happier. So
it's definitely pantomime when he's running off shouting and he realises there's no one there he's shouting at. He's just sort of, I've got to shout at someone, and he's just shouting to thin air. You sort of think, yeah, you're doing this for show.
I mean, I will use any opportunity to drop a Roy Keane reference in, but Keane talks a lot in his book about Schmeichel, about them two having run-ins, saying that a lot of Schmeichel's balling out defenders was largely just to self-aggrandise and to kind of draw attention to himself. But I kind of think I'm a huge fan of on-pitch communication. I want a keeper especially, I think, should be at the very least instructing their defence, because they should be acting as an extra pair of eyes. I like it if we've got a keeper who's communicating. I just wonder whether he will, at this rate, have any voice left to communicate with from next week.
Well, it removes all criticism as well from that side of things, because you always get people, he's not communicating, he's not, this guy is communicating, and that can't be levelled at him. So it's just one of those where if you're vocal, nobody can ever go at you for that, and they can just obviously judge you on your actual performance rather than the whole acting side of things.
Okay, good stuff. Any final thoughts or any plugs before we wrap things up?
No, I'm just reasonably okay at the moment. Oh, how positive at the moment. It's been an all right week.
2 games down. We're effectively 4-3 up on aggregate.
Yeah,
not too bad,
it was a good start. Back to League One this Saturday. If it's not called off. League Two. My God. Just remembered.
Yeah.
Back to the league. But that's even better because the Duck is going to run right.
I just really hope that. I just hope he's. If anything's come out of yesterday's debacle, is he took his opportunity and he deserves to get a chance in the team, because he did show something, and he showed that he's actually seems like a good player. And I think we just need a bit more out of those 2 strikers from what I can see.
I think there's going to be a riot if he doesn't start the next game, given the way that people have taken to him. So we'll have to wait and see. Okay, that's good. Thank you very much then, Paul.
Yeah, cheers.
Neil, quick detail of what we can find on the blog.
Bunch of stuff. Robbie Keane article coming up in the next couple of days. That'll be enjoyable. So have a look at that.
Fabulous. ScotlandBluesBlog.co.uk?
Co.uk, yes.
Okay, and thank you, Neil.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening. Bye.